So we continue with the discussion of the rulings of rabbi-messas with now where he makes a methodological statement regarding the study of Talmud. He goes back and forth with those issues. And this stems also from his understanding of history and the development of Halakha. It is important to know that what I think it only has changed in the last 20, 30 years, but at this time, at the beginning of the 20th century, the academic world started understanding better how rabbinical literature was structured, especially with Rabbi David Zvi Hoffman in Germany and Rabbi Frankel, Zachariah Frankel in Breslau and others, and there was sort of a split that continued up until the 1970s, where either because of academic research people abandoned halakha, or people who wanted to remain within the fold of halakha, but still learn and approach the text in an academic manner, incorporating history and linguistic and sociology and whatever, would have this cognitive dissonance between the conclusion that they derive when they look at the Talmud in an academic eye and their everyday practice. So now rabbi-messas touches on that. He says one should know how to distinguish between the core discussion in the Talmud and the mental gymnastics in it, because it is customary for the Talmud to present many arguments and questions, although the answer is already clear. Anyone who studied Talmud knows how frustrating it is to go through 20 questions in the Talmud that repeat the same formula. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And always get the same answer. No, this doesn't apply here because of A. This doesn't apply because of A. We already know that. Why are we going through this? He says, he explains, now, let's go to the original Teshuvah to say why he said that. So he writes to another rabbi from the Sephardic family, Rabbi Raphael Sarfati, from the city of Wujda, which is on the border of Algeria and Morocco. He says, "Michtav kevodo igiani, bo ba'ai mar minai lefaresh lo divrei hagaon Maharam Shif b'masechet Bitza." He says, you wrote a letter asking to explain the writings of Maharam Shif, one of the commentators of the Talmud from the 17th century, known as a very sharp mind, very difficult language. His writing is sometimes indecipherable, but because it is so difficult, it became a source of interest for later commentators trying to figure out what he said. And it's really sort of abstract mathematics. Doesn't lead, I'm not saying that all are like that, or deconstructionism not necessarily leads anywhere, but just explores all the possibilities in the language and in the halakha, even if this halakha is completely irrelevant, impractical, or even goes against the practice halakha. Meaning, when you do the abstract analysis of text, it's okay if you arrive at a conclusion that is not exactly as the norm, because you say this is just theoretical. We're not going to apply that. So,
Rabbi?
Yes. So here we see a long discussion that I'm not going to go into that. The whole thing is about, you just want to know, it's about when you slaughter an animal which is a hybrid of a domesticated animal and a wild animal. There is an animal like that in Israel. They try to grow. It's called ya'ez. It's a combination of ya'el, a wild goat, and ya'ez, a domesticated goat. So the question was, do you cover the blood or not? Because according to the Jewish law, you cover the blood of a wild animal, but not that of a domesticated animal. So what if it's during the holiday? Okay, there's a lot of discussion. And he says this, זה הנראה לי פשוט בפירוש דברי הגאון זכרו יגן עלינו אמן. So he answers the person who asked the question. He says, if you want to understand what the Rabbi Maharam Shif, what he said, here's the explanation. But אחר המחילה והסליחה רבה מקדושת עצמותיו, after I apologize and I ask forgiveness of his holy bones, because he already passed away, דבריו בזה הם רק חורפה שאינה של אמת. His whole argument is a brilliant display of analysis, but it's not true. Why is that? He says because the original question that he asked, whatever it was, is still valid even after his answer, because he provides the alternative answer. Meaning, what he says is Rabbi Maharam Shif tried to answer a certain question and provided this beautiful answer, very, we call it flashy answer, but it doesn't really answer the question, and the question is still valid. So rabbi-messas says this, אלא שכן דרך הש"ס בכל מקום להרבות בפרחות ויישובים עד שעומד על האמת. He says the method of the Talmud is to pile up arguments and counter-arguments until it provides the final answer. אף שידע מראשית אחרית הדברים, even though the author of the Talmud already knows the outcome. Meaning, what he says is that Maharam Shif comes from the point of view which says, given that we know that the answer is obvious and it's A, we cannot assume that the person who asked the question didn't know that answer. So he must have had something else in mind, a different interpretation of reality, which is B. And according to that, the question is valid. And he had to be countered by telling him this situation is not valid, and only A is valid, and now... So this all comes to explain how is it possible that the person who asked the question didn't know a basic fact. And rabbi-messas says, don't ask this question. Sometimes you ask a question to which the answer is obvious, and you only do it for the process to present all possible arguments. And he says, and it's possible, לפעמים בא אחד ומתרץ, ונעלם ממנו מאי דקשה על תירוצו, but it's possible that someone will try to answer the question, and he wouldn't see how his answer is flawed, ובא אחר ומגלה לו את הקושיה, and someone else will tell him why it's flawed, ובא אחר ומתרץ להוקמי תירוץ כמה, and someone else will try to explain the original argument, וגם ממנו נעלם, and he also would not see another fault, והש"ס דרכו בקודש להביא את הכל. Now, the Talmud brings everything, meaning that if there was, and here is a challenging an axiom in the Orthodox world, the Orthodox world believes that there is an editor. Rav-messas says that not necessarily that there was an editor, and therefore everything is put down. I mean, even if there was an editor, even if there was an official person who said, "Okay, that's it. We seal the book. We don't add anymore." It doesn't mean that editor went through the book and proofread everything and said, "Okay, this is superfluous. This is not necessary. We're going to put this aside." No, they just left everything as the original discussion. Compare that to an attempt to record a dialogue, not a dialogue, a conversation between several people in a room, right? And trying to report it verbatim. So this is the verbatim. A lot of things are unnecessary. You could trim them, you could take them out. You give, when you come and you report to others what you've heard in this discussion in the room, you will give an approximation. If you would report word by word, it will be confusing. There are people who do it all the time, who trim a conversation to the basic minimum, those people are called men. Well, they could hear the most intricate conversation, or have a conversation with someone else, and when they're asked by their wives or by another woman, what was it all about? Nothing. Or, they don't really care about the details when it comes to interpersonal relationships and stuff like that. But when it's halakha, when it's this kind of technical details, they are. So this is what happens in the Talmud, according to rabbi-messas. And he says, the Talmud brings everything. Sometimes the names of those who present the arguments are written, sometimes they're not, because they didn't know exactly who were the people who presented the questions or the answers. Or it could be that the arguments went back and forth between Ravina and Rav Ashi, who themselves were the editors. We know today, on top of what Rav Meshash wrote here, that after Ravina and Rav Ashi, who lived in the 5th century, officially said that, or did not add anything else to the Talmud, there were another 200 years of anonymous work where people kept adding material to the Talmud, and that is what creates a lot of the problems in the understanding of the Talmud. I will talk about this tomorrow in my session of Semicha, those who want to join, but it's important to say also, because the Talmud is still considered the most important book for a scholar to learn. Like a rabbi who cannot study Talmud, how can that person be a rabbi? But we should know that for about 300 years in the Sephardic yeshivot, Talmud was not studied. Instead, what they studied was the abridged version of the Talmud, called Talmud Rav Alfas, written by Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi of North Africa in the 10th century. And what he did, he was an editor of the Talmud. He trimmed the Talmud to the bare minimum, to the relevant questions and answer, and only to those laws which are applicable today. And the result is a Talmud that is about 1/3 of the Talmud that we have today. And I believe that if people would have kept learning that Talmud and not the Talmud that we study today, they would be more grounded in the real world and understanding of halakha, and less caught up with all kind of abstract discussion such as Rabbi Meshash describes here. So that is an important statement that Rabbi Meshash makes. Any questions on that specific discussion of the Talmud? Because this is a core element of our understanding of Torah Shebe'al Peh. Okay, so your question, that's a very good question, like asking how do I understand the style of rabbinic writing? So you could identify the writing of a period in some cases. There, for example, the rabbis of the Ottoman Empire, of Turkey and the Balkans, Edirne, Adrianopolis, Nicopolis, Constantinople, and those who went to Eretz Israel, like the Hida, Rabbi Eliyahu Kapsali, Rabbi Pontrimoli, other rabbis would write a very flowery language, and they would show they were interweave biblical verses with each other, and would make word plays on biblical words. And today, this became this interesting. The rabbinic style of writing. You would see different trends. There are those who try to write in that style, and that is, in a way, it's fake, because they're trying to imitate the style of previous generations, and it's not natural, not innate to them, and it makes it difficult for the contemporary reader to read the Teshuvah. But I think it comes from two sources. One is the aspiration to emulate the previous generation, and second, to make the text less accessible for the reader. Because this way, it becomes like the jargon of a closed sect, or like the academic elite, so that nobody can decipher. And then people still rely and they depend on the rabbis for the behind the scenes. I wrote a series of halachic discussions called Halakha Behind the Scenes, where I try to bring all these kind of obscure concepts and explain them, because we have the halakha today live in two different levels. The discussion, the dialogue goes on between the leaders in a language that the majority of people do not understand, and then they write some kind of a abridged version with the final conclusion without giving people a chance to see the process. Rabbi Meshash is a different story. He had a great command of the Hebrew language. He was, and which is common, by the way, for Sephardic rabbis. They always, when we speak about the revival of the Hebrew language, it's basically the revival of the Hebrew language in the Ashkenazi world, because the Sephardim always spoke Hebrew, especially since the Hebrew, alongside the Arabic, was another Semitic language which was as easy for them to acquire and speak. And as a matter of fact, when Eliezer ben Yehuda arrived in Yerushalayim, he says that he wants to emulate the Hebrew that the Sephardim spoke. He said it more than once. So they spoke the Hebrew language, but some of them in Morocco, especially, continued the tradition of Hebrew poetry, and Rabbi Meshash also wrote poetry. Maybe his poetry is not at the level of the Golden Age in Spain, but he did that also, and of course he was very knowledgeable in Tanakh. So his Hebrew, his teshuvot are usually mostly in Hebrew. If we look, for example, in the previous teshuvah, that happens to be about a child who was born out of wedlock, whether you do Brit Milah or not, it's almost the whole teshuvah is in Hebrew, there's no Aramaic. Because in this teshuvah he deals with a discussion in the Talmud, which is in Aramaic. He probably was carried away and used more Aramaic than usual. But I've seen that trend of writing in a way which is enigmatic to show erudition, and also I think to make it less accessible to the reader. To reiterate, in the 10th century, around the 10th century, the Jewish communities in North Africa and Spain started breaking away from the central command of the yeshivot in Babylonia. The two great yeshivot in Babylonia controlled the Jewish world, and it was a combination of religious monopoly and also a power play. They collected taxes from all Jewish communities, and it sustained a very lavish lifestyle in the court of the exilarch and the rabbis in Babylonia. At a certain point, there was enough knowledge in Spain, in North Africa, to produce local rabbis. Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi was one of them. He is called Alfasi after the city of Fez, which was a center of knowledge. I mentioned last time, though, this is the first university in the world was built in Fez by a woman. National Geographic recently had an article about the most beautiful libraries in the world, and one of them is in Fez. It's a modern library that was built in memory of that university. So Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi spent some time in Fez also, but he lived most of his life in a city called Qalat Hamad in North Africa, in Tunisia, and then the end of his life in Spain. And he was a very confident halachic decisive. In a way, even though we have this artificial, I think it's artificial division between Talmudists, the Gaonic period, the Rishonim, the early rabbis. He saw himself as part of the Gaonic literature and even a Talmudic rabbi, and he had a lot of courage in his halachic way. And you could say, I would say that what he had more than anything was the understanding that as much as you want to discuss the halakha in an abstract manner and show intellectual brilliance, you have to translate, you have to be pragmatic and translate that to the world of action. So one of the things that he did, he took the Talmud that everybody studied, I mean the scholars studied at the time, and rewrote it in a way that he eliminated all the unnecessary discussion, digressions, homilies, and irrelevant halachot, and it became known as Ilchot Rav Ilfas, or Talmud Rav Alfas, Alfas from Alfasi. To give you an example of his power in halakha, I spoke about it today in another class of the laws of blowing shofar. He instituted the blowing of the shofar on Shabbat. It says if the first day of Rosh Hashanah fell on Shabbat, in the Bedin of Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi, they would blow the shofar, even though they wouldn't do it anywhere else. Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi reasoned that how it was done in the time of the temple in Jerusalem, and then this tradition was carried on in the seat of the Bedin, of the central Bedin, and he said, since I have the central Bedin, we can blow the shofar here. So his understanding, as I said, is pragmatic. He says, for 1,000 years, people did not blow shofar on Shabbat. What have we gained by that? That we have deprived Rosh Hashanah of the one mitzvah which the Torah commands us to perform on that day. So he says, let's reinstitute that. He also had a major influence eventually on Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, because the master of Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon was Rabbi Yosef ibn Megas, who in turn was the disciple of Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi. So 6 generations from the Rif to Rambam, and eventually when Rabbi Yosef Karo writes his Shulchan Aruch, he chooses the Rif and the Rambam as his 2 pillars of halakha to rely on. So Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi is one of the major pillars of the world of halakha, both in the Sephardic and the Ashkenazi world, but is more known as a Sephardic posek. And we have to remember also that Maimonides himself wanted to get rid of the Talmud in a way. If we talk about like trying to get to put the Talmud in its right place, so Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi wrote this abridged version of the Talmud, and later on Maimonides, when he writes his introduction to his Mishneh Torah, which is a halachic compilation, he says that I'm just reading certain sections here. Derech amuka darko ad lim'od. The path of the Talmud is very deep. It means it's not easy to understand. Ve'od shu belashon arami me'orav im lashonot acherot. It's written in Aramaic mixed with other languages, like Ravital mentioned before. לפי שאותה הלשון הייתה ברורה לכל בשנער בעת שחובר התלמוד. This language was the lingua franca at the time of the creation of the Talmud. אבל בשאר המקומות, but in other places in the time of the Talmud, וכן בשנער בימי הגאונים, and even in Babylonia itself, in Geonic period, אין אדם מכיר אותה לשון עד שמלמדים אותו. People do not know Aramaic unless they're being taught. Meaning it's an acquired language and not a natural language. So he shows the problem with the Talmud. ושאלות רבות שואלים אנשי כל עיר ועיר לכל גאון שיהיה בימיהם לפרש להם דברים קשים שבתלמוד. And people ask many questions to the Gaonim of their day in order to explain the words of the Talmud. That's the comment that Maimonides wrote his other books, The God of the Perplexed and the commentary on the Mishnah, in Arabic. And then he realized, or he heard from people, that there are Jews who don't speak Arabic. And they're also interested in the books. There were other Ashkenazi Jews. So before he wrote the Mishneh Torah, he reasoned like which language he's going to choose, and he said he chose the language of the Mishnah, because the Talmud is too mixed with Aramaic. The Bible does not contain all the necessary language, the necessary words. So it's a very, one would say, very fluid, very easy to read language, the language of Rambam here. And that's the original, his original writing. And he says here, many questions were sent by answers were sent by the Gaon of the Day to the Gaon of the Day by the residents of different cities, asking for explanations of difficulties in the Talmud. So the system that was in place until about 100 years, 150 years before Maimonides was the people all over the world would send questions to the Gaonim in Bavel, asking them to explain to them the language of the Talmud. He says, and the Gaonim also explained in different periods, they wrote commentaries to the Talmud. Some of them wrote specific laws. Some of them commented on chapters or themes. They also wrote books of Halakha. And he says, but in our days, there were troubles that afflict us, and because of the pressure of the hard time, our wisdom has disappeared. And I have decided, he says, here, this is an important statement. Because of that, I, Moshe, the son of Ammon, bestirred myself and relying on the help of God, intently studied all these works. And it says, I decided to write the final conclusion of all these laws to the point that the whole oral law would be available and accessible to all without citing difficulties and solutions or differences of view, one person saying so, another something else. Exactly the problem that rabbi-messas is addressing. Meaning, Rabbi Moshe Maimon tried to eliminate that. He says, I want to write a book where you don't have all this give and take and back and forth. What do you think? We've already did that. We've already done that. There's no point of reviewing it again and again and again and thinking, what was it that they were thinking? Let's move on. But in a way, and as time has proven, it is comfortable for the rabbis of each generation, for some of them, to sink into this quagmire, because then you could live in the world of the abstract and not have this pragmatic application of halakha. So he decided to write a book that contains all these laws. I want all the rules to be accessible to young and old, whether they pertain to the precepts of the Torah, precepts of the Torah, or those by the rabbis. כדי שלא יהיה אדם צריך לחיבור אחר בעולם בדין מדיני ישראל. My goal is that this work would serve as a compendium of the entire oral law, so that no other work should be needed for ascertaining any of the laws of Israel. No Talmud, no Midrash, nothing. They have the Torah, and from the Torah you move to the Mishnah Torah of Maimonides. Of course,
that's pretty pretentious, huh?
Pretty pretentious, and it didn't work. It didn't work because people wanted to have the dialogue. People wanted to have the discussion. As you will, in my Spreaker class on Rabbi Yosef Karo, which is under Sephardic luminaries, and also when in methodology of Halakha, I explained very briefly that what we have is this: in terms of the development of Halakha, Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi did not want to rule the final Halakha. He cleared from the Talmud all the excesses, all the things that are not necessary, and let people continue with their study. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon wanted to create a uniform Halakha, one Halakha for all, and he presented the sort of the bottom line, the final Halakha, without options. It doesn't say some say this, some say that, or there is a custom, just one option and no sources. And people didn't like that because people need flexibility, and not only they need that, it's a natural thing. You'll have several people in one place and different communities and people traveling, and there will always be different opinions. So you have to provide wiggle room for people. And about 200 years after Maimonides, Rabbeinu Yaakov and Rabbeinu Asher, who moved from Germany to Spain and became acquainted with the Sephardic method, also decided to write a book of Halakha, and he wrote what is called the Tur, the Arba'a Turim, which was a compendium, but it was too encyclopedic. He brought together all opinions. So you had on one extreme the Rambam, who only gives you one option and no sources, and on the other hand, Rabbeinu Yaakov and Rabbeinu Asher, the two, who gives you 5 opinions and no final conclusion. Like what? So what should I do? Well, this one says A, B. I don't know what to do. How do I balance them? And then came Rabbi Yosef Karo, and he decided to create something that will balance the two works. And he created the Shulchan Aruch at the end of a very long process. It took him 30 years to get to this point. But what he did was, he created a book that seems like it offers a final answer. So on one hand, it gives people the certainty and confidence that they're doing the right thing. But at the same time, he left many halachot open-ended. And he did that by writing, some say A, some say B, or there is such a custom, or it's preferable to do that. So he always gives you the option of maybe you don't want to do that, maybe you want to take the other direction. So even when, in some places it was of course more emphatic, but his system proved correct. In other words, we could say that Maimonides wanted everybody to follow the ruling of Maimonides, and he failed. Rabbi Yosef Karo wanted everybody to use his book, not to follow his ruling, but to follow one of his rulings. He says, I don't care what you follow, as long as you use my book. And in this, he succeeded because everybody refers to Shulchan Aruch as the core book of reference, even though there are about 300 books that are called the Shulchan Aruch of, in different versions. The Shulchan Aruch of Morocco, of Tunisia, of Syria, of Poland, of Lubavitch, etc., etc. But they're all called the Shulchan Aruch. So he managed in creating this brand name, the Shulchan Aruch. So that is just like we briefly digress from the discussion of rabbi-messas to discuss the development of Halakha. But it's important to understand when rabbi-messas picks this argument with Rabbi Tzarfati over the understanding of Talmud, is basically saying, don't waste your time in abstract discussions that would lead you to a dead end. Do what is practical. So this is what we see there. We return to the writings of rabbi-messas. Here is another methodological statement, and one of his favorites. More than once, he had to deal with local rabbis who were somewhat aggressive, maybe verbally violent, and he rebuked them for that. He says, a rabbi should always address his listeners pleasantly and judge them favorably. Fire and brimstone sermons achieve an opposite result and alienate people from Judaism. Instead of seeing fault, the rabbi should consider the fact that despite the influence of the alliance and secular culture, these people are still observing many mitzvot. So this he's writing to a rabbi who was arguing against people who were less observant, and of course he referred to alliance to the system of secular education, secular Jewish education, that not everybody was happy with. So here's he writes to the Rabbi Saadia Dermon, and he say, "Michtavcha kibalti, I got your letter. Ve'af she'en raui la'ashivcha alav, it does not deserve an answer. Ki kulo sag yahdav ne'elahu kol devarav." Says the words are too aggressive and violent, and I didn't want to answer, but I have to fulfill the commandment of rebuking someone who does wrong. He says, "Amarti le'ochichacha al panecha." I have to rebuke you. Ech hirhavta oz benafshecha, lishloach meteg leshoncha. How dare you release your tongue to speak about the holy community with such words, such curses that were not written in the Torah even by Moshe, even regarding pagans. And you, picha shalachta bera'ah, you let your mouth go wild towards evil, and you did not remember that they are the people of Hashem. Not only that the rabbi said, Be'ira deshatit mine maya latishde bekala. We know this maxim as don't throw a stone into a well you drank water from. Kal vachomer libnei adam sheparnasatcha uparnasat bnei betcha tluya be'adam. They care for you, they are willing to provide for you as a rabbi, and you attack them in that manner. Be very careful. Lo levate od zarot al am Hashem. Be careful not to express such things towards the people of Hashem. She'afa rekanim shebahem meleim mitzvot karimon. Even those who are you consider to be empty are full with mitzvot like a pomegranate, appropriate before Rosh Hashanah. Umashe haser lahem, and if they miss something, hakolu mehasron yedi'ah. It's because they were uninformed. They grew on the knees of this eshkol. Eshkol is literally cluster, but you mean escuela, the secular schools. And they are not doing it willingly. This is how they were educated. And even though they upset you, God forbid that would cause them to suffer some of the curses that you pronounce against them. And God will turn all your curses to blessings for them. But why is he saying all that? He doesn't shy sometimes from rebuking people, but he says this: "Ve'od pashut u'varur, she'im kvodcha haya olech imahem beyosher u'venachat." It's obvious that if you would have treated them with honesty and with nicety, lo hayita magia imahem leshum davar ra, you would not get into such arguments with them. Ki chen amru, mi vami haholechim. It's a word play on a verse in Exodus when Pharaoh tells Moshe, mi vami haholechim, who goes with you? So he uses the word mi vami, which are the initials of Ma'asecha Yekarvucha U'Ma'asecha Yerahakucha. This is one of his mottos. It says, your actions will determine whether you'll be close to people or alienated from people. Don't blame them. First, look for your own fault. ועוד על זה, כי עזבו את כבודך הקרוב אצלם, ושלחו אחר מוהל ממקום אחר בתשלום השכר. He says, his argument was, why didn't they take me as the mohel? And he says, they could have taken you, you live there, but they preferred to bring someone else from afar and pay him. It's only because you act towards them with anger and with verbal violence. So those are very important words. And he says in the end this. And he says also this: the fact that someone else came to do the Brit Milah, his name was the Mohel who was brought, was Rabbi Shmuel Sultan, and this person who was addressed by rabbi-messas argued that the other Mohel is a trespasser because he took his business. And he says the proofs that you brought are invalid. It's not considered trespassing. You have no monopoly. It's the father of the boy who decides who would do the Brit Milah. And he should be comfortable with the person who performs the Milah. He is the one who's obligated to do that. Uvchen, he says this, Uvchen, haser ka'as min libcha, remove anger from your heart, v'ha'aver ra'a mi b'sarcha, and remove disease from your flesh. This is a pasuk in Mishlei, which today is corroborated by modern science. It's true, we know that when a person gets angry, there's adrenaline rush, and other chemical agents in the body, and then in order to calm down, the body produces another toxin to fight the to override the adrenaline. So basically, every time that we get angry, we are actually poisoning our body. So those are wise words. Don't get angry, and maintain your health. והווה מתלמידיו של אהרון אוהב שלום ורודף שלום, but rather be of the disciples of Aharon who loved peace and pursued peace. והשם ישפוט לכם שלום, and may Hashem bring you peace. שאם אין שלום אין כלום. Without peace you have nothing. עבד נורא והיום, he says, I am the servant of the revered one, blessed be he. אני היום, this is his signature. So how do you feel when you read this teshuvah? You see his leadership style. He says this is the way to behave with people. When you deal with them with respect, they will answer with respect. And when you come at them with anger and with wars, this is what you will get. Remember, I showed you I think you could see it on his. In his face, right? That this is genuine. And I know also from people who had the merit to know him in Haifa when he was alive. He passed away in 1974. So I was 9 years at the time, but I lived in Yerushalayim. So I never had the chance to see him. But people who did said that he was that type of leader that through his classes, through his teaching of Halakha, so the way that he handled people, he always could feel his genuine care for people, and that is should be really a staple of Halakha. That I think I mentioned before. People like to refer today, in different circles to the kinds of meta Halakha, like the external elements of Halakha, like considering emotions and circumstances. And rabbi-messas shows us that there's no such thing as meta halakha. Everything factors in. Everything is calculated. The emotions, the reactions, communication, outcome, history, ideology, sociology, language, everything has to be part of the process of halakha. And that is something that we will see in other teshuvot. I think next session, which will be after the holidays, we will start looking at teshuvot by Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Toledano. But for now, we might come back to Rabbi Yosef Mesash with his other books. But we'll stop here now, and wish everyone Shana Tova.